Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. So the photo shows a sky. It could be at dawn. It could be at dusk because the light is kind of warm. It's essentially 1/3 of the image has this 1/3. The top is the sky with a bit of cloud. You can just see it's kind of broken up cloud, but you can see all the way to the horizon. And then the bottom 2/3 of the image is the ocean, and it's reflecting some of the sky, so it's kind of warm. And what the bulk of the photo is this mess of, it's like a little island, or a large enough island, probably the size of a bus or whatever. It's just this big blob of plastics that have been kind of collected. So it's like this weird looking monster of white and green and yellow and orange plastics and black and rope, all just kind of tied together as if knotted into this huge, gross, floating marine debris. So how would you like to frame this photograph for a listener?
Well, actually, I think that my intention was to start with this photograph. Essentially, it just showing, going back to the original idea, showing what is happening to the oceans. What can you find floating on the surface? And we talk about these huge blobs of nets and lines, and we talk about the small pieces. Actually, speaking of those big blobs of floating derelict fishing gear or ghost nets, they have, because that's what we learn through our project, they capture the fish, and as you mentioned, they kill marine life, but also they promote the marine life, because it seems marine life is attracted to anything floating.
Yeah.
And actually, it's well known, probably you already know it, and probably listeners as well. There's a specific term for these devices that are called fish aggregating devices, and essentially any floating platform provides a little oasis of life in the ocean. Now the question is, what is the net benefit? And we believe that the net benefit is actually doing more harm to the marine life than good.
Okay.
And again, if you go, I will come back to this idea of floating marine debris and marine life, because that's the part of our now ongoing project, and it's related through the second picture. Actually, it's a figure, not the photograph, created by the computer, and it shows kind of colorful cloud spread through the North Pacific. And actually, what does it show? It shows our simulation of spread of tsunami marine debris from the tsunami that hit Japan in 2011.
Okay.
And well, we always recognize, and we always, when talking about this, is that it was a tragic event, and many people, they lost their lives, and many more lost the houses.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at it as a experiment, natural experiment, because unlike on a general marine debris, if you see the blob of fishing lines and nets floating, you don't know where it came from.
Right.
It could be floating there for a year, 10 years. It's not real. So far, we don't have any exact methods how to tell. We can just guess. However, in case of tsunami in Japan, we knew the exact location and we knew exact time.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition, many those items could be directly traced back because they are different. It's not a regular garbage, what you might find on beach anywhere, because they were different. Suddenly we see different types of debris coming into first on the west coast of North America, Alaska, Canada, and states of Washington or Oregon.
Yeah.
And they first got those big oyster buoys, huge buoys,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other items followed, including things like fishing boats with registration numbers.
Yeah.
There was a case with a floating container that had a motorcycle inside, and again, we have the number plates. You can trace it directly back to Japan, and there were many, many other indicators. When you see unusual type of debris coming in a time frame we expect it to come, that's most likely from the tsunami.
Yeah.
But what did to us? So we learn how different types of marine debris, how do they travel, how do they respond to wind and current differently.
Yeah.
And this effect is called windage. If you can imagine, if you have a light buoy sitting very high in the water, probably the current is not as important as the wind.
Okay.
And that's what happened with those oyster buoys. And if you have the fishing nets, like in those images, those photos I sent, you can estimate the current is important, maybe more important than the wind.
Yeah.
And that's how the so-called garbage patches are generated.
Mm-hmm.
It is the convergence by the currents. Actually, wind is diverging from those so-called garbage patches. So, ocean, in terms of currents and wind, is sorting out those debris for us.
Right.
Most likely, if you go to those so-called garbage patches, you might see one or two, those high windage objects sitting high in the water, but mostly it's filled with derelict fishing gear, like in those pictures I showed.
Okay.
That was one kind of knowledge we gain from this event. The second one was even more surprising, as coming back to the marine debris and marine life. There was the case in Japan, was a coastal town, Misawa, and they had floating docks for docking fishing boats.
Yeah.
There were 4. They were identical. Probably you heard the story. After the tsunami, there were none left.
Okay.
All 4 were swept away. One was found a couple months later. The time frame escapes me completely. In Washington State, other one in Oregon, and the third one was found floating north of Maui. That's the next island here.
Okay.
And actually, it was videotaped because the fishermen came there and actually walked on the dock, it's floating dock.
Yeah.
They took the videos. And of course, like probably as we discussed about the floating marine debris, they attacked marine life. The marine life was abandoned around those floating docks. Those 2 who washed up on the beaches on Washington and Oregon, the biologists have a look and they found Japanese coastal species on those.
Right.
Of course, that would not be that surprising because they said, okay, it's coming from Japan, they should be Japanese coastal species.
Sure.
However, what was revealing is some of those individuals, some of those specimens were younger than the travel time from Japan. And we knew the travel time of Japan because we knew the time when those dogs were lost.
Right.
So it means, on the conclusion, those coastal species were thriving and reproducing while on the way to the west coast.
Yeah.
And that kind of strange, not strange, kind of interesting hypothesis about ecosystem in those garbage patches, because we are dumping this stuff into the ocean for I don't know how many years, 50, 60 years, and suddenly, because the coastal species can get attached and survive on those floating pieces of marine debris, especially those fishing nets and lines, and they are collecting in the garbage patch. For instance, in our case, we look on North Pacific garbage patch.
Right.
So now the question is, do we create a unique ecosystem in the middle of the pelagic zone, on the middle where there should be no coastal species at all? It's all pelagic. And actually, that was the project we continue after the tsunami. With biologists, we have a look at some. They took the samples from some of those nets because for the cleaning purposes, we had volunteer sailors looking for those nets. They tagged them with satellite trackers.
Yeah.
And later, Mary Crowley with Ocean Voyaging Institute, she chartered the cleaning boat, and they went and big boat with big crane, and they were picking up those nets, taking samples.
Right.
And of course, we found, or biologists found, there are more coastal species than the pelagic species on some of those cases.
Right.
So that was kind of revelation for the marine biologists, that with all that stuff, now we are altering, or we are changing the ecosystem in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. What is so for example, on the one hand, there's the science, right, which is about making the clear observations of what's actually happening. So what is happening? What can we see? And not to project and not to extrapolate some kind of moral or some kind of guiding decision about to either bias our understanding, but just to say, okay, well, this is what it is, this is what's happening, and this is what we see, right? So in terms of your work, because on the one hand, you said that your training is very much rooted in atmospheric science, and yet the work that you're doing is very much anchored in the oceanic physics or whatever. So what is your driving interest, really?
Well, speaking of ocean and atmosphere is forcing the ocean on short timescales.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the ocean has the feedback on atmosphere as well. And so that's kind of interconnected. My colleague, who is actually principal investigator on all those projects, Nikolai Maximenko, is oceanographer. I am atmospheric scientist. So we actually meet at the surface.
Okay.
An interface in between ocean and atmosphere.
Sure.
So you would not have the currents what we have in the ocean without atmosphere, and vice versa. The atmosphere, the climate in certain places would be different without ocean currents, as you can.
Right.
Classical example is the Gulf Stream. But speaking of on a different level than the science, as I mentioned, I like the ocean, and I don't want to be polluted and marine life be disturbed in the ocean, because we are already losing many areas, especially coastal areas, due to human factors. You can imagine the runoff of pesticides, for instance. That was one example. You might have the other examples how the coastal areas are being damaged by human action.
Yeah.
So that's my kind of motivation beyond the science. Well, you can do science on anything, but it's not, much as fun.
Absolutely. But for example, a couple of weeks ago on the podcast, I had Charles Ade, who ends up, he's from Nigeria, ends up working in China, in mainland China. And he's doing the chemistry, marine science, and specifically looking at the chemistry of what's happening in the North Pacific, right? So how does the North Pacific act as a carbon sink? And what are the factors that influence that? So his connection, his work, and his driving sort of interest is very much in terms of climate science, right? And so a lot of what I'm hearing from you is more of the interest also essentially on the conservation side. So the impact of toxicology, impact of human factors on animal species. So how much of your work is on the conservation side, either be it on an organization? Because so my connection to Hawaii from running shark rescue was I was very much connected to a lot of the people doing shark conservation. And so so what part of marine conservation are you really sort of attached to and working in?
Well, I'm just thinking how to start to put it in. One of the kind of mottos or one of the ideas is you cannot manage what you don't understand. So we try to provide the understanding for not just the scientific community, but for people who actually do the work to clean up or to save or trying to improve the condition in the ocean.
Yeah.
So we, for a long time, we've been partnered with, I mentioned it already, Ocean Voyaging Institute.
Okay.
With Marie Crowley, and she's passionate about cleaning up the ocean. And of course, the ocean is big, as you can imagine, from Honolulu to the West Coast is 2,000 miles.
Right.
And if you want to clean it, it's probably a good idea to know where to go. So ship time is not cheap, and you don't want to spend tons and tons of fuel and wasted it on, not effectively do the job.
Yeah.
So our science or our kind of goal or what we are trying to do is to use our knowledge about movement of different marine debris and provide the data to those who are actually going there and do the cleanup. Of course, with their feedback, we learn more, as I mentioned, about the biology, because if you pick up the big fishing net, so cleaning it from the ocean, it doesn't take much to take the samples. And we have the samples of marine life from places which are not so easily accessible. You cannot probably go every day in the middle of the garbage patch and take the samples. So it takes certain effort. So that's the other aspect, how science is helping the real life and real life is helping the science.
Nice. Okay. Well, okay, so because you said helping the science, let's move on to the third photo.
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.